Hello and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be showcasing the new 17mm tilt-shift lens from TT Artisan, a wide-angle specialist lens for architectural photography. If you want to know why tilt-shift lenses are an important tool for capturing real estate, I've made a complete tutorial which I'll link to at the end of this video. TT Artisan have sent this lens to me and I do get to keep it, but they are not sponsoring this video and they will not see it before it's published. If any of you are new to tilt-shift lenses, then you need to know that they are all manual focus. Typically, when I'm purchasing a third-party lens, my considerations are around focus performance and stabilisation. When it comes to tilt-shift lenses, you can forget about both of those requirements, as this lens will live on a tripod and architectural photography generally is a very slow, considered process. So in this instance, there is no benefit in buying a native lens from your preferred camera manufacturer, providing that the optical performance of this is good. Assuming that you know the basics of these specialist lenses, let me show you around the new 17mm tilt-shift from TT Artisan. The lens is made of black metal with a matte finish, measuring around 120mm from the mount to the projecting glass element, with a diameter of around 70mm. The lens is fully manual, aperture is controlled on the lens via a metal ring, which goes from f4 through to f16, and consists of 10 aperture blades. The focus ring is metal with a smooth motion, the barrel extending around 2mm as you focus from infinity to the closest focusing distance. The lens design consists of 17 elements in 11 groups, with the front element projecting beyond the 82mm filter thread. The lens weighs 1042 grams, that's without any lens caps or a lens hood, and it has a 104-degree field of view. The closest focusing distance is 0.3 meters. The tilt and shift mechanisms are separately controlled via the tightening locks, and there are white markings to gauge the degree of tilt or shift. To enable horizontal or vertical functionality, the whole lens can be rotated around the lens mount by pressing the silver lock button and rotating the lens in either direction. The lens will be released in E, Z, RF, L and GFX mounts, and it's going to cost around $500. Once the product is actually available, you'll be able to check the prices in the links down below. At the time of filming this, there are no native mirrorless tilt-shift lenses from Canon, Sony or Nikon, and I'm still having to adapt my Canon 24mm tilt-shift lens, which was actually designed for DSLRs in 2009. Luckily, third-party lens manufacturers like TT Artisan are filling in the gap in the market. As I covered in my in-depth tutorial, tilt-shift lenses allow you to capture taller buildings without tilting your camera upwards to include the top of the building, therefore keeping all of the verticals perfect. Now, based upon my own experience and knowing lots of other photographers that specialise in architectural photography, the 24mm focal length is the go-to when it comes to tilt-shift lenses, and it's what I've been using for around 15 years now. But you will realise that the 24mm focal length is limited when you're in tight urban situations. This is where the 17mm comes in. Now, Brighton doesn't actually have many tall buildings apart from the i360 behind me, but there are a few buildings that I think will work quite well at 17mm. So I'm heading across town. I think I'm going to start with the Royal Pavilion, which, if you've never seen it, it's going to blow your mind. So, if you've never been to Brighton before, or you've never heard of it, this is the Brighton Royal Pavilion. Have a look at that. And what you'll see here is that there is a pond in the foreground. Sometimes it's presentable, sometimes it's a bit messy, but there's a classic shot where you shoot with a wide angle lens with the pond in the foreground, and that's the shot I'm going to capture with the 17mm. Right, there is no denying the fact that this is a big heavy lens, and I was a little bit dubious about putting this on a travel tripod, but I tested it out yesterday and it's absolutely fine, and there's no wind and I've got nice steady ground to work with. And you'll also notice that I haven't put the lens hood on, because you can see this is how the lens cap works. Kind of just clips in there like that, and then you twist it and then you take it off. If I had the lens hood on here as well, you can't actually put the lens cap on, so I've chosen to use the lens cap. You can see here I am using focus peaking, and I'll just focus on those details there because this is a manual lens only. You can see here, because this is a manual lens, you're not getting any aperture settings baked into the metadata at all. So I'll take a couple of shots at different apertures, different settings, and then we can figure out where this lens performs best. Now, these first 5 images right here are shot at f4, f5.6, f8, f11 and f16. Now let's zoom in a little bit. So starting with the f4, zooming into the middle, I am immediately impressed at the optical performance of this lens. You're obviously going to be interested in how it performs towards the edges. In terms of, if you're new to tilt shift lenses, don't expect any great lens corrections. Lightroom doesn't offer any lens corrections at all. You can definitely see, if you look at the building, the center of the pavilion is brighter than the edges on all of the images as I scroll through. So that seems to be consistent. If that is vignetting, then that doesn't seem to go away, even at f16. Going from f4 on the left to f5.6 on the right hand side, you can see you are gaining some detail in the middle. There's no doubt about it. At 5.6 it's looking very, very crisp indeed. Having a look at this detail here, yeah, there's definitely a jump in the detail going from f4 to f5.6. This is f8 and this is looking mighty crisp indeed, really sharp. Ignore the fact that these verticals are off. That was human error. I would typically shoot a lens like this at f8 or f11 anyway. So looking at this at f8, I am very, very happy with that indeed. This is f11. So I'm kind of looking around the image, around where the building meets the sky, which you typically see some chromatic aberration, a bit of red, purple, sometimes green fringing. I'm not witnessing any problems at all with this. So it's handling chromatic aberration really well. Right, on the left hand side you've got f8 and on the right hand side you've got f16. So f8 to f11 is typically where I would shoot a lens. f16 if you had to get the most amount of your scene in focus. I wouldn't ever stop down a lens any less than that. I think that there is a subtle benefit in sharpness on the f8 version. If your ultimate goal is to get as much of the scene in focus as possible, there's not much in it. So there you go, very impressive indeed. To summarise the optical performance, on the left hand side you've got the f4 and on the right hand side you've got the f8. I think that the results wide open at f4 are fantastic, but for the ultimate sharpness from this lens, I'd say stop it down to f8 or f11. Okay, so I've just finished capturing all of the base images at all of the different apertures, and at the moment I don't know which aperture this performs best at, but I'm going to leave it at f11 for the next tests. And what I'm interested in doing is now shifting the composition to see if that affects optical quality. Now what I've noticed is, because I'm used to using a Canon 24mm tilt shift, when you want to shift it, there's a knob on the side of the Canon lens, and one of them loosens and tightens it, and the other one actually physically you twist it and it pushes the lens up and down. I would say this is one of the features where you can see where the price difference lies, because on the TT Artisan version, you unloosen it and it will quite simply just drop. You can see here. In order to use this effectively, what you have to do is you have to put your hand under the lens, loosen it, and then physically guide the lens to where you want it to be shifted. If you're not careful, if you just undo it, it just aggressively drops, which is not great in my opinion, because I've become accustomed to the Canon version, but this is just the reality of it, and this is what you're getting for the price difference. Right, so I'm filming this on the Sony at the moment. If I'm just going to loosen that up a little bit and I can shift it up, you can see that's the maximum shift. I could tighten that up. If you wanted, let's just say you were doing a book cover or something and you just wanted loads of negative space, obviously this is going to be just what you need. If I loosen that up a bit and drop it, you can see that's how low it can be shifted. Next up we have shifting the lens. Does this make any difference to the optical performance of the lens? We're shooting at f11 and this is without any shifting, and then I've half shifted it and then that is fully shifted. So zooming into the half shifted image, looking in the middle of the frame, I'm not seeing any difference at all. Towards the edge of the frame, again, that's exactly how I'd expect it to be. And then towards the edges, I'm not seeing any issues at all from half shifted image. Fully shifted image, I'd say that's pretty consistent, and I'm not seeing any areas of concern when it comes to optical performance when you're shifting this lens. For me, I would say the reason you would step up from something like a 24mm tilt shift to a 17mm, which I would say is quite niche, is if you've got commissions where you need to photograph an entire building, the building is quite tall or wide, and you simply don't have enough space to get distance from the building, that's when you're going to need a 17mm. So I'm looking around and I've found quite a big church on the high street. I don't think that any camera can possibly fit that all in one go. I was going to try and make my life a little bit easier and find a different subject, but no, this is it. So this is St Paul's Church on West Street in Brighton. And as you can see, I've got a reasonable amount of distance, but I can't go any further back. And I'm going to get a portrait composition of this. And this is where you would need definitely to have a 17mm, otherwise you're just not going to fit the whole building in. I think that this might just work. Oh, I've done it. It's actually worked. Look at that. I've got the whole church in the shot. So up until this lens arrived in the post, I don't own a single lens that I would have been able to capture this entire image in one. I've got wide angle lenses, but this required a 17mm fully shifted vertical composition. There's no other way of doing that. I do not own anything that would have got this. So had this been an actual commission from a client, I would have had to take a drone shot or talk my way into one of the buildings over the road or something like that. But now, possible. Now, one other reason why you may consider going from 24mm even wider, such as 17mm, is for drama. The amount of distortion you get with a wide angle lens is a look. So many photographs of buildings are in existence. If you want to create a unique shot, sometimes something technical, just like a wider, more distorted shot, is the way forward. So you may choose to go with the 17mm purely just for the drama. And the last image I want to capture this morning before I have to head back home is the i360 whilst the pod is up in the air. Speaking of distortion, if you want distortion, then you have no choice, because if you shoot vertically, you can see here the donut, as we call it, the i360, is round if you look at it on plan. But as you look at it from the side and from down here, it's an oval shape. When you look at it on the vertically shifted version, it is now an oval in a vertical format. There's no getting around the fact that this is a wide angle lens and it is very, very distorted towards the edges. This image I stopped down to f16 to enjoy some of the sun stars, and I'm happy to report that this lens has got some beautiful sun stars. Sun stars don't always have to be this obvious in your image. If you're taking nighttime scenes or interiors where you've got spotlights, just subtle sun stars scattered around your image can be very tasteful. The reason I'm including this image is because lens flare is a real issue with this lens. As I said earlier in the video, you've got to make a choice. You can either carry around your lens hood and keep that in your bag. Alternatively, you're going to have to shield your lens. Here's another scene where the sun is literally hitting the side of the lens element, and this is the sort of thing you can expect. This isn't a lens defect. Any 17mm or really wide angle lens is going to suffer from exactly the same issue, but I'm just giving you real world examples of how this lens is in use. Okay, and the final example from Brighton seafront is some Regency buildings, and the reason I'm including this is because you can see a subtle barrel distortion. I'm pretty sure that this building is straight. Okay, I've lined up all the verticals to the best of my ability, and even though we've got lovely sharp details all the way into the edge, you can see that the cornice of the building is actually starting to bow a little bit. So there you go. I just thought I'd show you an example of the barrel distortion that you can expect at 17mm. Up until now, Canon were the only company that made a 17mm tilt shift, and Nikon, they also made a 19mm, both being a very niche, expensive investment. But now that TT Artisan have created this lens, it's more attainable than ever. You can see a common theme that all of these lenses, including the TT Artisan, have a projecting lens element. This needs protecting as well as being a challenge when it comes to using filters. Companies such as Nissi make a 150mm filter system which accommodate the lens movements even at 17mm without any vignetting. If you need to use filters with this lens, then just take that into consideration when you're weighing up the cost, because you'll need a new filter system as well as new filters. I didn't really cover the tilting aspects of this lens, as it's not something that I tend to use for achieving more depth of field, especially with a wide angle lens. I would opt to shoot with a smaller aperture, say f11, and focus stack if I had a particularly deep scene with an interesting foreground, middle ground and background. But the feature to tilt the lens is there if you need it. My final thoughts on this lens: it's a hefty lens, but that's inevitable considering how much glass is inside. On the basis that you should be using this on a tripod anyway, this is slightly irrelevant, but you should be aware that you'll notice this in your camera bag. The things that I think could be improved, and there are a few. Due to the sheer weight of this, I found that the lens would be tilting slightly when I took it out of my camera bag, sometimes, despite having already tightened up the lock. If TT Artisan were to make a second version of this lens, I would highly recommend a locking switch to avoid this from happening, as Canon have done with their models, as there are a few times when I was taking photographs with the lens slightly tilted and I had no idea until it was too late. On a similar note, the user experience of the shifting mechanism is let down by the need to use both hands at the same time. As I mentioned earlier, Canon have dealt with this by using a separate wheel to shift the lens up or down, but there is no risk of the lens just dropping under its own weight. The knob on the side of the lens of the TT Artisan does create more or less friction, but it's not strong enough to actually hold the weight of the lens itself. It also means that it's very difficult to make very subtle adjustments. My final criticism of this lens is the design around the mount. As you can see from many of these Sony lenses, they are all designed to accommodate your fingers around the grip, with a slimmer part before it splays out into a larger lens. The TT Artisan 17mm doesn't do this, and as a consequence there is minimal gap to get your fingers around the grip. It's still functional, but anybody with larger hands might struggle to hold this setup comfortably. Despite these criticisms, I think that this lens is going to sell very well, and it's for several reasons. First of all, it's in a native mount, so you don't have to worry about the added size, weight and cost of an adapter going in front of your mirrorless camera. And secondly, is the price. A 17mm tilt shift lens is a very niche product, and the Canon version of this lens is around 4 times the price new. So if this lens comes in around the $500 mark, it becomes immediately accessible for many that can't justify investing in such a specialist lens. So there you go, I hope that this review has been helpful. Thanks to TT Artisan for sending out this lens for review. If you got any questions, then let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video.